welcome to R11 Math Now's Complementary Angles, the podcast that goes over current events in mathematics and the real world of mathematics.
The tagline for our R11 Math Now series is professional learning anytime, anywhere. So we hope you enjoy our podcast and you can listen to it anytime, anywhere.
So today we are going to dive into engagement and what does it look like for students to be engaged and or disengaged from the learning.
What'd you say?
Is that an example, David, of disengagement? Pay attention.
Wait a minute, you're my superior. No, ma'am, it's not an example. That's not an example at all.
You're fully focused on the podcast, right, David?
That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Yes, ma'am.
I got my eye on you.
So today what we want to focus on in engagement are the types of engagement that teachers observe, especially in the COVID environment that we're in. And we want to also talk about the ways that we can maximize our engagement for student learning. So the first question that we did in our slow Twitter chat, what's your angle, was what does it look like to be disengaged from learning? And what we asked our people to do is to give us some memes of what they thought what disengaged learning looks like.
And so as you can imagine, we got a variety of funny memes, of heads banging on the desk, students twirling around on their chairs, just general inattentiveness. But we know that during COVID, that sometimes those observation or the way kids are disengaged is by not tuning in or by not completing their assignments. Just talking really about today about ways we can help students reconnect really with the learning if they've been disconnected. Now, there are a variety of reasons why a student may not tune in to a lesson. They may be sharing computers with people at home. They may be watching their younger brothers or sisters. So, we need to think about, just because they're not with us live right then doesn't mean they don't want to be active and they don't want to participate in the learning.
So we need to talk about how teachers need to have realistic expectations that engagement doesn't look the same as it does when they were face-to-face. We could walk aisles, we could make eye contact, we could do more things, group activities, where we can plan and use classroom management strategies to keep kids engaged. We all know that when kids are engaged, the incidence of misbehavior goes down, the opportunities for kids to get higher grades goes up. It's just a better situation. But in a virtual environment, that's not possible.
So say more about in a virtual environment about that not being possible. Can you add more to that?
Well, if the kids turn off the camera, we can't make eye contact. If the kids have their microphone muted for background noise that they don't want to be shared through the discussion, then they can play. And to be honest with you, think about it, in the secondary classroom, we were constantly fighting phones. But like when I was in the classroom, we had problems with phones. I made phones part of the solution. We would do QR codes or online discussions, things like that. So I could use the phone. Well, they're on a little screen right now. So I don't know what else is going on outside the screen. So I can't monitor that and give them realistic options, alternatives to what's distracting them.
So, but what I hear you saying, David, is that they may not have their video on. That doesn't mean they're not engaged. That might, because we can see that students may have good reasons to not have their video on. Maybe there's people at home or little brothers and sisters in the background or whatever. And so we have to kind of change our perception of what engagement looks and sounds like.
So I'm thinking about, so just in general about the topic about, what does it look like when kids are not engaged in the classroom? And so some of what we saw were, students spinning in chairs and, tapping their pencil or maybe placing their head down or even putting headphones in. which is a great indication for our high school students or our middle school students. But what does that look like on the elementary side? What do our students that are coming to school and they're sitting in their chairs and they appear to be paying attention? How do we know, how do we measure their level of engagement or disengagement? It's pretty obvious with the older ones, but what does it look like for a younger kid? You know, sometimes they become disruptive, sometimes maybe they appear to be a little bit off task. But I'm just thinking, how do I know when my students are disengaged? So, like, if I'm in a quiet classroom, does that mean that my students are engaged? Do I listen for, does chaos mean, or I say chaos, does a louder classroom, does that mean students are disengaged because they're too loud? What are some signs of some things that would show me if I'm teaching kindergarten, if I'm teaching sixth grade, eighth grade, or 12th grade? What are some things that kids show me outside of spinning in their chairs that would also be indications of disengagement or highly engaged students? Like, what would that look like? So how can I tell? Because if I'm having a hard time even picking up that piece, how do I improve that, or how do I make it? I don't know.
Michelle, I have this term called butts in the air. And basically what that means for engagement is that the students are leaned in to conversation, talking to each other, and their butts are literally off the chair, and maybe not real high, right? But they're leaning in so much that to the task and into the conversation that they're literally coming off the chair, or the chair is leaning forward with them. So that's one, to me, that's one way I used to measure engagement. But again, I think we're just in a different different scenario, that even a task like that, a group of 4 students working on something together where they are close enough to have that great collaboration, looks different in COVID. I don't think we have that same atmosphere.
I can just remember when my kids were highly engaged, how boring it was as a teacher. I could walk to a group and look in, and they were just so into it. So it was like, and I didn't want to interrupt them because they were on a good flow. I maybe offered, but I wanted to join in. So it was a fun time for me, but it was a boring time because I didn't get into education to not have interactions with students, but they were so into whatever task we were doing that they didn't need my input, and then they quite willingly wanted to solve it for themselves. I thought that's, to me, whenever I felt I had a boring day, I just thought, oh, I really had a good day.
You know what, David, I did not have that same experience. I mean, to me, if I had a day like that where they were so into it, I was right in there with them. And at the end of the day, is like that, I would be thinking, that task went really well, or that session went really well. I mean, to me, it was excited me to see their thinking, and to be amazed that they thought of something I didn't think of, or they had a different way of thinking about it. Though that's how my bucket as a teacher was filled, was just listening to my students. And I think that is a key piece, that when we talk about engagement, is that when you can get that, when you can hear what they're thinking, when they're free to kind of make mistakes and share from their perspective, that's, to me, that's where I got my joy out of teaching, right there. That's why I came back for 34 years to teach.
Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it too. It did give me opportunity to go work with individual kids who might be struggling and need a little support. But like, it was just, I would just walk around from group to group and going like, can I play too? And they would almost like, no, we don't need you. You're good. So like, it was fun. I mean, to get that, unicorn task where everybody's running to get to your classroom to go do the next thing. Or I think the funnest one I had was, we were doing a stock market game to do, it was an algebra class where we were measuring linear regressions, just, predicting trends. And I get called into a PLC for social studies to get chewed out because all of my kids were pulling up on their phone stock market apps to check the price of their stocks just to see if they're going to make money that day. I mean, you know, if you have somebody else's subject complaining about yours engaging your kids too much, you've won. Okay? So activities, resources, tasks. I mean, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't necessarily have to be little, but it just has to be engaging. Just something where the kids want to emotionally invest in it.
Well, and to me, part of that is a challenging task. If the task doesn't require that much depth of thought, which I guess as you go up in math, probably you might think every question requires a depth of thought. But if there's like a really meaty, open-ended question that we can have some differing opinions about or some different approaches to it, where I think that is the basis of really getting kids to buy in or to have that interest in the lesson. And during COVID, it's harder when we know we have kids are working asynchronously that might be doing the task on their own. How do I then, show that student or give that student the opportunity to see what the other students in the class thought that might spur their thinking, or they can have a small piece of that same level of engagement that you get in the face-to-face classroom.
What is one thing that you have done to increase engagement, whether it be in working with teachers or working with kiddos? What's one thing that you all have done?
Well, one of the things that I think is really, really important, and I think I mentioned that just briefly a second ago, is this idea of the challenge. And it starts with getting an open task that kids can enter in at their own grade level. And I might start with a task that's really easy for everyone to get buy-in and then up the level. So it might have an open response at first, but then as we get some discussion going, the ideas flowing and the students are thinking, then the challenge can go up. So I think Dan Meyer calls it turning the math dial up slowly. Get them in and then crank up the challenge, crank up the thinking, and you get engagement.
Well, I think to add to that, it really helps when you are passionate about what you're teaching and you have a full depth of understanding of where you're trying to go with it. And that's probably one of the things that, I've seen teachers do well is when they absolutely love what they're teaching, not so much that lesson for the day, but they love the unit that they're on. They know the direction they're trying to go. They understand the vertical alignment and where kids are coming from the previous grade level and where we're trying to get them to go after they leave us. A lot of times that will drive better questions and it'll drive a better task and it'll allow you to pick a really good task like you were talking about with multiple entry points because you know what you're trying to pull out of the students and you know where you're trying to get the students to go. And I would say that's probably the one thing that I've seen really make the most about increasing engagement in the classroom is when the teacher is very, very passionate and excited about what's happening in that moment with the content that they're currently teaching. And that helps students tap into curiosity as well, because sometimes the students will say something and it'll make you go, I didn't see it like that. And when a student can get the teacher to say that or to react like that, then you have engagement not just on the student side, but you also have engagement on the teacher side. And when there's engagement from both sides, then they begin to see the classroom as a place of learning for all. And it's a partnership, not just this is a teacher and I'm the student and they teach me and I respond. It's really, they start to see it as a partnership where everybody's learning together.
I think curiosity is gold because it is crazy the level of thinking that happens when you don't give them everything, right? Like I remember bringing into class a paper bag that had a big question mark on it, and I just sat it down on a table, and all it was a paper bag. And the kids would come in, they'd be like, "What's in the bag, miss?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's a mystery. What's in the bag?" And so just when I can get them to ask questions, even if it's just what's in the bag, I already got them hooked, and I got them. They're going to be waiting to see what's in the bag, and I'm not going to tell them for a while. I'm going to build that curiosity, and I think if we can grab onto that in our math classes too, we see it in different types of resources out there right now. Like Steve Wyborney has the mystery maths, and Dan Meyer has the 3-act tasks. So there's so many free resources at our disposal that really build on this idea of curiosity. So the best advice I could give you is to tap into their curiosity, because it is engagement gold.
And I would add on to that and say, get them to make a hypothesis and have to prove if it's right. If I can get them to make an assumption, oh, it's going to do this, and then get them to show that it didn't do that and explain it, I don't have to spend time trying to get them in. I don't have to spend time trying to get them to learn new math in order to make it work. My favorite one was having the kids make paper airplanes, and we'd go in the hallway and throw them to measure the distance that it flew versus the area of the original piece of paper. Well, they had this operating theory of like, if it's a bigger piece of paper, it travels farther. No, because the paper got so big it couldn't support its own weight, and it dropped almost as much. So here's this assumption. They thought this data was going to do this one thing, and when they go out and actually test it, it made an entirely different relationship. So I could set them up for the next thing, and I didn't have to engage them. It was a practical, very real world thing in their hands. They had experience with it, and it
But I think you did engage them. When you say you didn't have to engage them, I think that was the engaging part. That was engaging.
I didn't have to go out of my way to walk around to each group. Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? I didn't have to do the teacher marathon. You know, whenever you do group work, sometimes you decide that, maybe I need to wear my running shoes today because quite frankly, I'm going to get all of my steps in third period. So yeah, it's, not every activity does that. Not everything in math lends itself well to that, but the days you get it, it's gold.
But I think it could. I think we could utilize the resources, and we have a great HOTS live binder. HOTS meaning high order thinking skills. That are this binder links to free websites that our favorite mathematicians promote the things that they've developed that build this curiosity. So we'll put that link in for you, and that's a great place to check out some ways that curiosity is being built by our most favorite mathematicians around the country, even in Canada. Some of them are in Canada. So that's a great place to start your planning and your research, is with our hot slide binder. So
What I was going to say, and to add to that, one of the things that allows for students to take the risk and be able to ask questions and be able to identify their own mistakes and learn from them, or make assumptions and go test them, is the classroom culture is very important, and the relationship that the teacher builds with the students and how the students are interacting with each other. In the beginning of the year, throughout the course of the year, as long as you're building that culture of the classroom where risk-taking is accepted and mistakes are opportunities to learn, and they see things from that perspective, then whatever task you give them, whatever the learning for that day is, they're more likely to engage in it because they know that it's a safe place. They know that the learning environment has been set and that we're all learning together. And I think that sometimes we have these great resources, but we're maybe missing the mathematical norms or the classroom culture that accepts the kind of learning that we are wanting it to get to. And so I would say, if you find yourself using these great resources, but it's not quite getting to the depth that you want it to, see how the students are relating to one another. How are they using accountable talk? How are they using sentence stems to be able to support each other? How are they communicating as a group? So maybe there are some other things that you can also build into the classroom to help build that engagement as well, to help with the task.
Let's do one good thing that teachers could do either going into next semester or over the break to help with kids stay engaged, or at least stay into the math over the break and into the next semester. Like for me, I'm going to recommend a Desmos Arcade, where you take 6 or 7 activities, open them up for the whole, for optional, and let kids do them for like pre-credit for the next semester. But it's really just a review, but you go leverage really high engaging activities like stuff from retro Desmos or stuff from the more gamified stuff from Desmos. So it's really high energy stuff. And then just let the kids play that over the holiday break, and just to make it a little bitty baby arcade, just something they can do. And if they want to do it, they can. So you don't put a lot of pressure on it, but you make it as highly engaging as humanly possible to review the material that you covered first semester.
As for me, mine would probably be not necessarily over the break, just in general. What's one thing that they can do to improve engagement is, I would say, turn and talks. Really take a look at turn and talks and leverage those to the highest level that you can. So really taking the opportunity for students to think, pair, share, or write first, talk second, where you pose a problem or you pose a situation or a solution. They take a look at it, they write whether they agree or disagree with it, and then they turn and talk with a pair or with a partner. I would say really using turn and talk to increase student discourse coming back from break would be really great to get them back engaged, to also kind of bring back in things that they learned before break. But I think turn and talk is one of the strategies that students can really engage in and that teachers can use to learn so much about where kids are at, but also to increase engagement in the content of whatever it is that they're teaching.
So if I was gonna say what's one thing you could do over the break, I would build off what Michelle was talking about earlier about building that community. And I would just take that opportunity to send a card, write an email, make a phone call to every student, letting them know how much you care about them, asking about their break, how things are going over the break, telling the students what they did in the first semester that made you really proud and what you're hoping that they'll do in the next semester, and to continue that learning, and just really reach out and give them a kind of a virtual hug, because a lot of our students maybe won't be in the best situation over the break.
If there's something that you've done that has improved engagement in your classroom, hey, feel free to comment underneath this podcast. We would love to hear from you.
That's all we have time for today. It was a great conversation, and I hope you have a chance to come visit us later. Follow us on Twitter at #R11MathNow. I hope that you had a great time listening to us and being a part of the conversation. Thank you very much, and have an awesome, awesome day.